The slap sounded louder than it should have, sharp and flat, echoing off polished walls like a gunshot fired indoors. For a fraction of a second, nobody in the room understood what they had just witnessed. Rank protocol, decades of rigid hierarchy. All of it froze in place as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's head snapped to the side and a thin line of red bloomed at the corner of her lip. What followed next would quietly destroy a powerful career, redefine loyalty, and expose a truth most people inside the room were never supposed to see. But that moment didn't start with violence. It started with silence. The briefing room at Seabrook Coastal Command was built to intimidate. High ceilings, flags standing at perfect angles, long oak table polished until it reflected faces like a mirror. The kind of place where people lowered their voices without being told to. Officers filled the room in crisp uniforms, back straight, hands folded behind them, eyes forward. Every detail screamed order. Sarah Mitchell stood near the far end of the room, slightly behind the primary line of officers. She was used to being positioned there, not overlooked, just placed. She had learned early in her career that excellence didn't always put you front and center. Sometimes it made you invisible, and that invisibility had kept her alive more than once at T-29. Sarah was younger than most in the room, but her record carried weight. Operational commendations, clean evaluations, no scandals, no shortcuts. She didn't smile much, not because she was cold, but because she had learned that smiling too much invited assumptions. Today, her face was neutral, professional, controlled. Admiral Richard Hawthorne entered without announcement. Conversations died instantly. Chairs scraped back as officers stood at attention. Hawthorne didn't acknowledge the room at first. He walked slowly, deliberately, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning uniforms the way an inspector might scan equipment. To him, people were systems. Systems existed to be controlled. He stopped near the center of the room and finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with authority. He commented on readiness, on discipline, on expectations. Every sentence carried the subtle message that failure was not just unacceptable. It was personal. Sarah listened carefully. She always did. The briefing moved on to recent operational reports. One of them was hers that Hawthorne's finger tapped the printed pages in front of him. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, without looking up, "you authored this assessment." "Yes, sir." He looked at her now, slowly, his gaze assessing in a way that felt less professional and more invasive. "Your report suggests a procedural weakness at the command level." "It identifies a risk, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "One that could escalate under specific conditions." A few officers shifted. Calling out risk was acceptable. Suggesting command-level vulnerability was delicate. Hawthorne leaned back slightly. "Are you implying oversight failure?" "I'm stating observed patterns," she said. "The data supports." He cut her off with a raised hand. "Do you understand who approves those procedures?" "Yes, sir." "And you still felt comfortable writing this?" Sarah took a breath. This was the moment she had anticipated when she submitted the report. She had debated softening the language. She hadn't. If she had learned anything, it was that sugarcoating facts only delayed consequences. "Sir," she said calmly, "rank doesn't change the facts." The room went silent. Not the quiet of attention, but the quiet of danger. The kind that made skin prickle, that Hawthorne's expression hardened. He stood, slowly, every movement deliberate. He walked toward her until they were less than a foot apart. "Check your rank," he said, voice low. Sarah held her ground. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "I know my rank, sir, and I know my responsibility." The slap came immediately after. For Sarah, time fractured. There was pain, yes, but more than that there was disbelief. Not because she had been struck, she had faced worse, but because of where it happened. Who did it? And who watched? She tasted blood and felt heat rise to her face, but she did not raise her hands. She did not step back. Her eyes stayed forward, glassy but unbroken. Somewhere in the room, someone gasped, and somewhere else, someone moved. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Walker had been leaning against the wall near the security station, posture relaxed, eyes unfocused. To anyone who didn't know him, he looked like a background presence. Just another enlisted man assigned to watch a room full of officers. But Daniel Walker noticed everything that he had noticed the way Hawthorne's questions shifted from professional to personal. He had noticed Sarah's controlled breathing, the slight tightening of her jaw. He had noticed the silence stretched too long. And when the Admiral's hand came up, Walker didn't think. His body moved before his mind caught up 0.2 steps. That was all it took. Before the guards could react, before protocol could intervene, Walker was between them. His left arm redirected Hawthorne's momentum. His right leg swept low, precise, controlled. The Admiral went down hard. The air knocked clean out of him, shock replacing fury. Walker didn't strike again. He didn't shout. He stood over Hawthorne, hands open, palms visible. "Stand down," he said quietly. The guards froze. Weapons were half raised, uncertainty rippling through them. Who had authority here? The man on the floor or the one standing over him? "Medical," someone shouted. Hawthorne was helped to his feet, face flushed, eyes blazing. "You assaulted a superior officer," he barked, pointing at Walker. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Walker met his gaze without flinching. "I prevented further harm, sir." Sarah watched from where she stood, cheek burning, mind spinning. She hadn't asked for help. She hadn't expected it. And now, because of her, someone else stood in the line of fire. The room was cleared within minutes. Orders were given in clipped tones. Sarah was escorted out for medical evaluation. Walker was taken into custody, his expression unchanged as the doors closed behind them. The briefing room returned to silence. But it was a different silence now. One filled with questions that would not stay buried. Sarah sat alone in a small medical room, ice pressed to her face. The medic spoke softly, professionally, documenting everything. Every detail mattered now. She answered questions automatically, her mind replaying the moment over and over. Had she gone too far? Had 3 words undone everything she had built? Across the base, in a stark holding room, Walker sat on a metal bench, hands resting on his knees. He stared at the floor, breathing steady. He knew the system well enough to understand what was coming. Investigations, hearings, careers on trial. He didn't regret what he'd done, but he wondered if anyone else would understand why. The base buzzed that night with rumors. Stories shifted as they moved from mouth to mouth. Some painted Hawthorne as provoked. Others whispered about Walker's background, about things he'd done that weren't on any public record. Sarah's name circulated too, usually followed by silence. High command took notice. Security footage was requested. Statements were ordered. What had been meant as a routine inspection was now a liability. The next morning, Sarah was summoned to provide her account. She walked into the interview room with her shoulders back, face still marked but chin lifted. She told the truth. Every word. She didn't embellish. She didn't accuse. She described events as they happened. When asked if she felt her response had been disrespectful, she answered honestly. "I felt it was necessary." Walker's interview followed. He was asked why he intervened. He could have cited protocol. He could have invoked duty of care. He didn't. "I saw an officer struck," he said. "I acted. No more. No less." Behind closed doors, evidence was reviewed. Footage showed the slap clearly. The timing. The distance. Walker's intervention was fast, controlled, and stopped immediately after the threat ended. The truth was inconvenient. Admiral Hawthorne's statement painted a different picture. Stress, provocation, loss of control. But the footage did not bend to narrative. Days passed. Tension thickened. Sarah returned to duty quietly. Some avoided her. Others nodded in respect. No one spoke openly. Walker remained on restricted status, his future uncertain. Late one evening, Sarah stood alone outside, watching the ocean churn under moonlight. She wondered if integrity always came at a cost. She wondered if she would pay it alone. What she didn't know was that decisions were already being made far above her rank. And what Daniel Walker didn't know was that a single act would ripple far beyond that room, challenging assumptions about power, loyalty, and silence. This was only the beginning, because when truth collides with authority, it never ends quietly. And if you want to know what happened next, how careers were dismantled, how loyalty was tested, and how one choice changed everything, Make sure you're subscribed to Generals and Truth Stories. This story is just getting started. Sarah didn't realize how deeply the moment had cut until the base returned to normal on the surface. People went back to routines. Salutes were exchanged. Orders were given and followed. But underneath it all, something had shifted, like a fault line quietly cracking under pressure. She felt in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. Not hostile, not supportive either. Careful, as if people were afraid that standing too close to her might draw attention they didn't want. Daniel Walker felt it too, though his experience was different. Restricted to quarters, no missions, no training rotations, he had too much time to think. He replayed the moment again and again, not questioning his action, but its consequences. He had spent years operating in places where lines were blurred, where decisions were made in fractions of seconds. This wasn't like that. This was slower, colder. Political point 2 days after the incident, both of them received official notices. Separate hearings, separate panels, same question hanging over them. What really happened in that room? The investigation team arrived quietly. No fanfare, no public statements. They interviewed everyone who had been present, from senior officers to junior guards. Each version added texture, but the core never changed. The slap, the intervention, the silence afterward. Security footage became the anchor. It didn't lie. It didn't flinch. It showed Admiral Hawthorne stepping into Sarah's space. It showed the strike. It showed Walker moving, stopping the threat, then stepping back. The footage didn't show intent. It showed reality that Sarah's hearing was first. She stood alone in a plain room, hands clasped behind her back, eyes forward. 3 officers sat across from her, faces neutral. They asked about her report, her words, her tone. "Did you intend to challenge authority?" one of them asked. "No," she replied. "I intended to communicate risk." "Did you consider phrasing differently?" "Yes." "Why didn't you?" She paused. This was the question that mattered. Because clarity matters more than comfort, she said, especially when lives could be affected. There was silence. Notes were taken. They asked about the strike, how it felt, whether she believed it was justified. "No," she said simply. They asked if she felt threatened afterward. Yes. When she was dismissed, no one told her how it went. She walked out with the same uncertainty she had walked in, without Walker's hearing followed the next day. He sat, shoulders relaxed, hands folded loosely. He had testified before, but never like this. This wasn't about classified missions or operational decisions. This was about hierarchy. "Why did you intervene physically?" one officer asked. "Because the situation escalated to violence," Walker replied. "Could you have used verbal commands?" "Possibly," he said, "but there wasn't time." "Did you consider the consequences?" "Yes." "Yet you acted anyway." "Yes." Another pause. Another note taken. "Do you believe you violated protocol?" Walker met their eyes. "I believe I upheld it." That answer hung in the air. Admiral Hawthorne's hearing was closed to most. Word filtered out in fragments. Raised voices. Long pauses. Arguments that leaned heavily on years of service and sacrifice. But years didn't erase footage. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Some argued that discipline demanded consequences for Walker. Others argued that ignoring the Admiral's action would send a message no one wanted to send. The question wasn't just about 3 people anymore. It was about culture. Sarah tried to focus on her work. She ran drills, reviewed reports, kept her head down. At night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of standing in that room, saying nothing this time, watching something worse happen. Walker spent his nights staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the base. He wondered how many times he had told his own men to trust the system. He wondered if he still believed it. A week passed. Then the decisions came quietly. Admiral Richard Hawthorne was relieved of command, pending further administrative action. The announcement was brief, sterile, carefully worded. No mention of the incident. No admission of wrongdoing. But everyone knew Sarah was officially cleared. Her report was reevaluated and validated. Her conduct during the incident was noted as professional under duress. No apology came. None was expected. Walker received a formal reprimand. a document placed in his file. But alongside it, in a separate channel, came something else. A commendation for decisive action to prevent harm. Not public, not ceremonial, quiet. The message was deliberate. The base exhaled. Sarah was called into her commanding officer's office the next morning. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't soften his words. "You did your job," he said. "That doesn't always make things easy." She nodded. "I understand, sir. There will be eyes on you now," he continued. "Some supportive, some not. Keep doing what you're doing." She left feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Walker was released from restriction the same day. His unit welcomed him back with the kind of silence that meant respect. "No congratulations. No jokes. Just nods." Later that evening, he found Sarah standing near the edge of the pier, watching the water. He hesitated, then approached. They stood side by side, neither speaking at first. "Thank you," Sarah said finally, not looking at him. Walker shook his head slightly. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," she replied. "That's why I said it." They shared a quiet smile, small but real. Months passed. The incident faded from daily conversation, but it didn't disappear. It became a reference point, a reminder whispered in classrooms and briefings. A moment when the unspoken rules were tested. Sarah's career continued. Slowly, steadily, she became known for clarity, for calm, for not backing down from facts. Younger officers sought her out, not for comfort, but for honesty. Walker returned to deployment. His reputation followed him, reshaped, not just a skilled operator, but someone who would act when others froze. They crossed paths only once more at a joint exercise. A nod, a brief exchange. Nothing more was needed. The system didn't change overnight. Power never yields easily. But a crack had formed, and light had slipped through. Some stories never make headlines. They don't trend. They don't get official recognition. But they live on in quiet ways in how people speak up, in how they step in how they remember that rank commands authority, but integrity commands respect. And if you want more stories like this, stories about courage, truth, and the moments that test who we really are, don't forget to subscribe to Generals and Truth Stories. Because some truths deserve to be told, even when they're uncomfortable.